What happens when a daytime talk show host pushes a celebrity guest too far live on national television? In just 33 seconds, Denise Welch turned what should have been a friendly chat into one of the most shocking confrontations in Loose Women history. Chris Appleton walked onto the Loose Women set that afternoon, expecting a fun, lighthearted conversation. The celebrity hairstylist, known for his work with some of the biggest names in entertainment, had been invited to talk about his latest projects and his journey in the beauty industry. The studio audience applauded warmly as he took his seat on the famous panel sofa, flashing his signature smile. Denise Welch sat at the head of the table, flanked by fellow panelists Nadia Sawalha, Kay Adams, and Linda Robson. The energy in the studio felt normal at first. Casual. Welcoming even. "Chris, lovely to have you here," Denise began, but there was something in her tone. Something sharp hiding beneath the surface pleasantries. "Thank you so much for having me," Chris responded, genuinely excited to be there. "I've watched the show for years." "Have you really?" Denise shot back quickly, almost cutting him off. "Because I find that hard to believe. You seem far too busy for daytime television. You know, with all your A-list clients and your glamorous lifestyle." The other panelists exchanged quick glances. That was fast. The interview had barely started, and already Denise was taking jabs. Kay shifted uncomfortably in her seat, while Nadia's smile became noticeably more strained. Chris laughed it off, trying to keep things light. His smile remained friendly, genuine. "No, honestly, I love the show. My mom watches it religiously. She's probably watching right now, actually. Hi, Mom." He gave a small wave to the camera, trying to inject some warmth into what was already becoming a chilly atmosphere. "Oh, so you watch it with your mom then?" Denise pressed, leaning forward, her elbows on the table. "Not on your own time? It's just something you do to humor her, is that it? A little charity viewing for the old lady?" Nadia jumped in, sensing the tension building like a storm cloud over the panel. "Chris, tell us about working with all these amazing celebrities. What's that like? It must be such an incredible experience." Chris seemed grateful for the redirect, relieved to move past whatever Denise's problem was. "It's incredible, you know. I get to travel the world, work with talented people who are passionate about their craft, and do what I love every single day. I mean, I wake up excited to go to work. Not everyone can say that. I feel very fortunate, very blessed to be in this position." "Fortunate," Denise repeated, her voice dripping with something that wasn't quite sarcasm, but wasn't friendly either. She said it like the word tasted bad in her mouth. That's one word for it. Some might say privileged. Some might say you've had doors open for you that others could only dream of. "I'm sorry?" Chris's smile faltered slightly, confusion crossing his features. "Well, you've had quite the easy ride, haven't you?" Denise continued, ignoring the warning looks from Kay Adams beside her, who was practically burning holes in the side of Denise's head with her stare. "Famous friends, celebrity connections, opportunities handed to you on a silver platter. Must be nice to just coast along on other people's fame." The studio audience went quiet. You could have heard a pin drop. This wasn't playful banter anymore. This wasn't the cheeky back and forth that Loose Women was known for. This was something else entirely. Something darker. Chris kept his composure, but you could see the confusion morphing into something else in his eyes. Disappointment, maybe. Or hurt. "I've worked really hard to get where I am. I mean, really hard. Long hours, years of training, building relationships, perfecting my craft. I started from nothing and built my career from the ground up. Nobody handed me anything." "Oh, please," Denise scoffed, actually scoffed on live television, her hand waving dismissively in the air. "Spare us the rags to riches story. We've all heard it before. Every celebrity says the same thing. I worked so hard. I sacrificed so much. I earned everything I have. It's getting old." Linda Robson tried to intervene, her voice gentle but firm. "Denise, I think what Chris is trying to say is that his success didn't just fall into his lap. And that's admirable. I know what he's trying to say, Linda, Denise snapped, cutting her own co-host off mid-sentence. I'm just not buying it. Chris shifted in his seat, his body language showing clear discomfort now. The professional smile had completely disappeared. I'm not sure what I've done to upset you, Denise, but I came here today to have a nice conversation, to talk about my work, to share my experiences, maybe inspire someone watching at home. I didn't come here for this. Upset me? Denise laughed, but it wasn't a warm laugh. It wasn't even a fake laugh. It was cold, almost cruel, the kind of laugh that's meant to belittle. You haven't upset me, darling. I'm just asking questions. That's what we do here. That's what journalism is. Or can't you handle a bit of real conversation? Can't handle someone not kissing your feet for once? I can handle conversation just fine, Chris replied, his voice remaining calm despite the obvious attack, though there was steel underneath now. I've done hundreds of interviews, thousands maybe, but this feels less like conversation and more like an interrogation. Like you're trying to catch me out on something. Like you've already decided you don't like me and you're just looking for reasons to justify it. The audience murmured in agreement, heads nodding throughout the studio. You could feel the room shifting, the energy changing. People were starting to realize this wasn't part of some planned bit, some staged controversy for ratings. This was real tension, real hostility, and it was getting worse by the second. Some audience members looked genuinely uncomfortable. Nadia tried again. Maybe we should talk about your new product line, Chris. I heard it's doing amazingly well. Of course it is, Denise interjected before Chris could even respond. Everything he touches turns to gold, apparently. Must be nice living in that bubble. What bubble? Chris asked, his patience clearly wearing thin. The celebrity bubble, Denise said, gesturing dramatically with both hands now, her voice getting louder. Where everyone tells you how wonderful you are, how talented you are, how special you are, and nobody dares to challenge you or ask you a difficult question. Nobody tells you the truth. Everyone's too busy trying to get something from you or stay in your good graces. You're not asking difficult questions, Chris countered, his voice finally showing some real edge now, his patience clearly wearing thin. You're just being rude. There's a difference between challenging someone and attacking them, and you've been attacking me since I sat down. The studio went completely silent. Dead silent. A guest had just called out the host, live on air, in front of millions of viewers, and nobody knew what would happen next. This was unprecedented territory for loose women. Guests didn't fight back like this. They usually just laughed off the tough questions and moved on. Denise's face changed. Her expression hardened, her jaw set. Rude? You think I'm being rude? You think asking you real questions instead of softballs is rude? Yes, Chris said simply, holding his ground, meeting her eyes directly. I think you've been rude since the moment I sat down. Actually, since before I sat down. Since I walked out here. Kay Adams jumped in quickly, trying to defuse the situation. Let's all just take a breath here. We're all friends. Are we, though? Denise challenged, her eyes still locked on Chris. Because friends don't come on your show and act like they're too good for it. I never said I was too good for anything, Chris protested, his voice rising slightly. You're putting words in my mouth. I'm calling it like I see it, Denise fired back, her voice sharp as broken glass. You waltz in here with your designer clothes and your perfect hair and your celebrity lifestyle, your Instagram perfect life, and you expect us all to just fawn over you like everyone else does, like we're supposed to be grateful you're even here. That's not fair, Linda said, speaking up more forcefully now, her voice carrying real conviction. Chris has been nothing but polite. He's been patient. He's been kind. He's tried to answer every question. This isn't on him, Denise. Stay out of this, Linda, Denise warned, her finger actually pointing at her colleague now, jabbing the air for emphasis. Chris stood up slightly in his seat, not quite standing fully, but clearly preparing to, his hands gripping the edge of the table. I don't need to sit here and be disrespected like this. I don't need this. Nobody needs this. Oh, here we go, Denise laughed again. That same harsh, ugly sound that wasn't really a laugh at all. The celebrity can't handle a little bit of pushback, a little bit of reality, so he's going to storm off. How predictable. How absolutely predictable. This is what they all do when they don't get their way. It's not about pushback, Chris said, his voice shaking slightly now. Whether from anger or hurt or both, it was hard to tell. It's about basic human decency. It's about treating people with respect. You've been attacking me, personally attacking me, from the moment I walked out here. Not asking tough questions, not challenging my views, just being mean. Attacking you? Denise's voice got louder, echoing through the studio. I've been doing my job. I've been asking questions. Real questions. If you can't handle that, if you can't handle someone not worshiping the ground you walk on, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Maybe you should just stick to Instagram, where everyone can tell you how great you are. Your job is to make guests feel comfortable and have an interesting conversation, Chris shot back, his voice stronger now, more confident. Not to tear them down for no reason. Not to insult them. Not to make them feel small so you can feel big. That's not journalism. That's not even good television. That's just cruelty. Nadia reached over and touched Chris's arm gently, her expression sympathetic. Chris, you don't have to put up with this. You really don't. No, I do have to, Chris interrupted, looking at Nadia with appreciation, but also determination, burning in his eyes. Because if I don't say something, she's going to keep treating people like this. Someone has to call it out. Someone has to say, this isn't okay. The camera cut to audience members with their mouths literally hanging open. Some with their hands over their mouths in shock. This was unprecedented. This was unlike anything they'd ever seen on this show before. This was history being made. Live. Right in front of them. Denise stood up now, her full height towering over the panel, using her physical presence to try to intimidate. Excuse me? You're going to lecture me about how to do my job? I've been on this show for years. Years. I know what I'm doing. Who do you think you are coming in here and telling me how to run my show? I'm someone who deserves respect, Chris said, standing up fully now to meet her energy, to match her presence. Just like everyone else who comes on this show. Just like every human being. Just like your co-hosts who you keep cutting off and dismissing like their opinions don't matter. Kay nodded slightly, as if she'd been waiting for someone to say it. This is my show, Denise declared, her hand on her chest. Mine, and I'll run it however I see fit. It's not just your show, Linda corrected quietly but firmly. It's all of ours. Denise whipped around to look at Linda, clearly not expecting that. What did you just say? I said it's not just your show, Linda repeated, louder this time. And Chris is right. You've been awful to him since he sat down. The betrayal on Denise's face was visible. Her own panelist had turned against her, on air, in front of millions of viewers. You know what? Chris said, his voice cutting through the tension. I came here to promote positivity, to talk about my work, to have fun. But this, he gestured around the panel, this isn't fun. This is toxic. Then leave, Denise spat out. If it's so terrible, just leave. Maybe I will, Chris replied, his jaw set. Maybe you should, Denise challenged. The studio held its collective breath. This was the moment, the breaking point. Chris looked at Nadia, then at Kay, then at Linda. I'm so sorry, he said to them specifically. You three have been nothing but kind. This isn't about you. We know, Nadia said softly, sympathetically. Chris turned back to Denise. I hope you figure out whatever it is that makes you treat people this way. I really do, because this behavior is unacceptable. Get off my stage, Denise commanded, her voice like ice. Gladly, Chris said, and he started to walk off, but Denise wasn't done. You're nothing but a hairdresser who got lucky, she called after him, her voice echoing through the studio. A hairdresser playing dress up with famous people. Chris stopped walking. For a moment, it looked like he might turn around and say something else, but instead, he just shook his head and continued walking toward the exit. That's right. Walk away, Denise continued, seemingly unable to stop herself. Run back to your celebrity friends who'll tell you how amazing you are, because you won't get that here. Not from me. Kay stood up suddenly. Denise, that's enough. Sit down, Kay, Denise ordered. No, Kay said firmly. This has gone too far. Way too far. Nadia stood up too. She's right. What you just said was completely out of line. Linda was already on her feet. Chris didn't deserve any of that. Now Denise was facing a full rebellion from her own panel. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of the implosion. You're all taking his side? Denise looked around in disbelief. He's the one who called me rude. He's the one who disrespected this show. He called you rude because you were being rude, Kay stated plainly. We all saw it, Denise. The whole country saw it. Chris had reached the edge of the stage now, but he could still hear everything. He turned back one final time, not to argue, but to address the audience. I'm sorry you all had to witness this, he said directly to the crowd. This isn't what I wanted. I just wanted to share my story and maybe inspire someone. But I won't be spoken to like that. Not by anyone. The audience erupted in applause. Actual applause. They were applauding the guest, not the host. They were supporting Chris and showing their disapproval of how Denise had behaved. Denise's face went red. You could see the realization hitting her. She'd lost the room. She'd lost her co-hosts. She'd lost the audience. All because she couldn't control her need to tear someone down. Fine, Denise said, her voice tight. Everyone thinks I'm the villain. Fine. But I was just being honest. I was saying what everyone else was thinking. No, you weren't, Nadia corrected her. You were being mean. There's a difference. Chris gave a small wave to the audience, a sad smile on his face, and then he walked off the stage completely. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the silent studio. For a moment, nobody said anything. The four remaining panelists just stood there, the weight of what had just happened settling over everyone. A producer's voice could be heard off camera. We need to go to commercial. But before they could cut away, Denise had one more thing to say. If he can't handle the heat, he shouldn't have come into the kitchen. This wasn't heat, Denise, Linda said quietly. This was cruelty, and you know it. The camera finally cut to commercial, but the damage was done. In the span of less than 10 minutes, a routine celebrity interview had turned into one of the most uncomfortable, shocking moments in daytime television history. Chris Appleton had come to Loose Women to talk about his career, his passion, and his success. Instead, he'd been met with hostility, jealousy, and outright disrespect from a host who seemed determined to make him look bad. But the plan had backfired spectacularly. Because while Denise had tried to paint Chris as some out-of-touch celebrity who couldn't handle real questions, what the audience actually saw was a professional, kind person being bullied on live television. They saw someone who tried to keep things civil, who gave Denise multiple chances to course correct, and who only pushed back when things became unbearable. They saw Chris compliment the other panelists, even as he was leaving. They saw him apologize to the audience for the disruption. They saw him maintain his dignity, even as Denise tried to strip it away with her final cruel comment about him being just a hairdresser. And they saw Denise. They saw her refuse to listen to her co-hosts. They saw her double down on her attacks. They saw her inability to recognize when she'd crossed a line. They saw her blame everyone but herself for the situation she'd created. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Denise had accused Chris of living in a bubble where nobody challenges him, but she was the one who couldn't handle being challenged. She was the one who expected everyone to agree with her. She was the one who thought she could say whatever she wanted without consequences. When Chris finally disappeared from view, walking out of the studio, and presumably out of the building, there was a collective exhale from everyone present. The tension that had been building and building and building had finally broken, but not in the way anyone expected. Not with a resolution, not with an apology, not with any kind of understanding reached between the two parties. Just with an exit, a dramatic, necessary, completely justified exit. The other three panelists sat back down slowly, looking at each other with expressions that seemed to say, "Did that really just happen?" Denise remained standing for a moment longer, her arms crossed, her face still flushed with anger and something else. Maybe embarrassment, maybe realization, maybe both. "We'll be right back," Kay said to the camera, her voice professional but strained. And then they were off air, at least temporarily, and the real conversations could begin. But those conversations, whatever they were, happened behind closed doors, away from the cameras that had captured every brutal second of the confrontation. What started as a simple interview had ended in disaster. A guest had walked off the set. A host had shown her true colors. Co-hosts had turned against each other. An audience had witnessed something they'd never forget. All because Denise Welch couldn't let a celebrity hairstylist have a pleasant conversation on her show. All because she had to prove something, had to knock someone down, had to assert her dominance in the most public way possible. And in doing so, she'd revealed exactly who she was. Not the fun, outspoken, tell it like it is personality she'd cultivated over the years, but someone who could be petty, jealous, and unnecessarily cruel to someone who'd done nothing to deserve it. Chris Appleton had walked onto that stage as a guest. He'd walked off as the moral victor of one of the most shocking talk show moments in recent memory. Not because he'd planned it, not because he'd wanted it, but because when pushed to his absolute limit, he'd stood up for himself with grace and dignity. And Denise? Denise was left standing on a stage she claimed was hers, surrounded by co-hosts who just publicly disagreed with her, in front of an audience that had applauded her guest as he walked away. The question wasn't whether Denise had gone too far. The answer to that was obvious to everyone watching. The question was why. Why had she been so hostile from the start? Why had she continued to attack, even when it was clear she was losing everyone's support? Why had she made that final cruel jab about him being just a hairdresser when he was already leaving? Maybe it was jealousy of his success. Maybe it was resentment of his youth and opportunities. Maybe she was having a bad day and took it out on the wrong person. Maybe she genuinely believed she was just being honest and direct. Whatever the reason, it didn't matter, because regardless of her intentions, the impact was clear. She'd created one of the most uncomfortable television moments in years. She'd alienated her co-hosts. She'd lost the support of her audience. And she'd turned a guest into a sympathetic figure who'd been forced to defend himself against unprovoked attacks. Chris had said he hoped she'd figure out whatever made her treat people that way. It was a generous thing to say to someone who'd just spent 10 minutes trying to humiliate him on national television. But that was the difference between them, really. Chris, even in his anger and hurt, could still extend compassion, could still hope for someone's growth and healing. Denise, even when she was clearly in the wrong, could only double down, could only attack harder, could only try to get the last word in, even if that word was cruel and unnecessary. The studio audience had seen it. The viewers at home had seen it. The other panelists had seen it. Everyone had seen exactly what had happened and who was responsible. And that's what made it so shocking. Not just that it happened, but that it happened so publicly, so undeniably, with no way to spin it or reframe it later. The cameras had caught everything, every dismissive comment, every interruption, every attack, every moment where Chris tried to keep things civil, and every moment where Denise refused to let him. They'd caught the other panelists trying to intervene. They'd caught the audience's reactions. They'd caught Chris's final decision to leave rather than continue being disrespected. And they'd caught Denise's complete inability to see that she was the problem. Her insistence that she was just doing her job, just being honest, just asking questions. Her refusal to acknowledge that there's a difference between being direct and being cruel. When Chris walked off that stage, he took with him his dignity, his professionalism, and the support of almost everyone who'd witnessed what happened. He left behind a host who'd let her worst instincts take over, co-hosts who'd been forced to choose between loyalty and doing what was right, and an audience that had gotten way more drama than they'd bargained for. It was the kind of television moment that people would talk about for years, the kind that gets replayed and analyzed and discussed endlessly. Not because it was planned or scripted or designed for maximum impact, but because it was real, raw, uncomfortable, shocking in its honesty and brutality. Chris Appleton had come to Loose Women expecting a fun interview. He'd left after being pushed too far by a host who seemed determined to make him the villain of a story where he'd done nothing wrong. But the story didn't go the way Denise had planned. Instead of exposing Chris as some out-of-touch celebrity, she'd exposed herself as someone capable of cruelty for no apparent reason. Instead of winning the audience over with her directness, she'd alienated them with her meanness. Instead of proving she was the one in control, she'd shown everyone that she'd completely lost control. And Chris, the guest who was supposed to be taken down a peg, had emerged as the clear good guy, the person who'd tried to keep things positive, the person who'd stood up for himself when necessary, the person who'd maintained his composure even when being attacked. That's what made the whole thing so dramatic. The complete reversal of what Denise had intended, the backfiring of her strategy, the way her own behavior had turned the audience against her and in favor of the person she was trying to diminish. It was a masterclass in how not to conduct an interview, how not to treat a guest, how not to respond when you're clearly in the wrong. And it was a reminder that sometimes the person who seems to have all the power, the host with the microphone and the platform and the home field advantage, can still lose, can still be held accountable, can still face consequences for their actions, even if those consequences are just the court of public opinion. Chris didn't need to yell or make a scene or fight back with equal cruelty. He just needed to stand up, state his boundaries, and walk away. That was enough. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to participate in your own mistreatment. Refuse to sit there and take it just because someone expects you to. Refuse to make yourself smaller so someone else can feel bigger. Chris refused. And in doing so, he won a battle he never wanted to fight in the first place. The whole thing lasted less than 10 minutes from start to finish. 10 minutes that felt like an eternity for everyone involved. 10 minutes that would be remembered, discussed, and analyzed for much longer than that. 10 minutes where a celebrity hairstylist became an unlikely hero simply by demanding basic respect, and a talk show host became the villain of her own show by refusing to give it to him. That's what happened when Chris Appleton was kicked off Loose Women after a fiery clash with Denise Welch. Not a planned controversy, or not a publicity stunt. Just a real moment where one person's cruelty met another person's refusal to accept it. And the cameras captured every second.